behind you. Good times lie ahead. With company worth keeping, that'll bash a smile in your head. Come on in, the door's open, you'll find just the finest folks here. Pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let our stories your ear. Cause we're talk the tavern. Here you're always welcome. The talk the tavern. Promising beer and bedlam. The talk the tavern. Music, medicine, then some. The talk the tavern. The song's over. Here we come.
And welcome to April 22nd's episode of Talk of the Tavern, where we're going to talk about tabletop gaming past, present, and future. I could have swore I had a more exciting name in mind for this episode, but I couldn't remember what the hell it was. It's
Games of Future Past.
You know, that was one of my favorite story arcs from the comic, from the X-Men comic. For me, it even rivaled the Dark Phoenix story. So anyhow, let me do intros here. I'm the host. I am Travis Sivard, and my vices tonight is going to be some bourbon, some Coke, Coke Zero, 0 calorie cocaine, and a pipe with, I don't remember what I put in it. It's been in there a while. So let's see who else we have joining us tonight. We have John Millington of Conquest Publishing. What's your vices tonight?
Well, I'm having a 0.2, but it's a Sierra because being at the store, they frown upon having, well, adult beverages.
I'll keep that in mind and not let them see it.
There you go.
That's right. You guys are all askew on the screen. And what about Robert Turk of Wicked Clever Games?
Hey, I am drinking Liquid Paradise Voodoo Ranger IPA. It's disgusting.
Why?
It's really...
Why is your camera not moving?
My camera's not what?
Moving. I don't see... Oh, now you're kind of moving. I'm wondering if it's... You know what? Bear with us just a second. I'm going to switch us over to Central and see if that helps at all. Or if it screws everything up. There we go. We'll give that a shot now. There you go. I can actually see your eyes shifting. They're very shifty eyes. I have a buzz in my audio tonight, do I? Okay.
Yes, you do.
Now, was it there the whole
But it
time?
was just me. Since we went live, it's been there. It was not there beforehand.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Sounds like you're being zapped with a stun gun every time you...
Interesting. Well, there we go. Let's play with some tech here. It was good in the trial run.
Indeed.
Okay, is it still there?
Well, I don't hear the buzzing right now.
Okay.
I don't either.
And maybe whatever I jiggled and wiggled made it all better. Okay. Thank you, Win. And how are you tonight? What are your vices? So we introduced Robert, Wicked Clever. You told us your vices. And now let's go to Chris, who has the worst vice of all of us, because it's not one he's even going to enjoy. What do you got tonight, Chris?
Oh, what don't I have going on tonight? Filling out rental application currently. Drink-wise, I will be drinking some mead eventually, which, because I'm doing this, I forgot to go get, so it's over there, but, you know.
You know what? We will all understand if you're like, screw you guys, I'm going mead. And then leave for 30 seconds. So nobody will have a issue with that. So, Win, you're actually the perfect person to hang out with us tonight because we're going to be talking about the role-playing game industry, culture, etc. But first, this is pretty much my D&D group, minus Andrea, who will be home later, and Aaron, who has a different game to play tonight. So, did everybody have a good weekend? I know it's been a week or 3 since we played last, but any exciting developments in anybody's life in that time?
I mean,
No.
Tech in a show, found a place to live, hopefully.
There you go.
Yay!
Is it awesome?
I'm the kitchen's bigger and better.
So more area to make dirty
A little bit.
and leave shit stacked everywhere.
We're thinking of there will be an extra room, so I think we're gonna put that as like an office and turn it into a general use office / streaming room, because several of us do weekly streams of various stuff. So
Nice. It's now I know you had some car issues. Is that anything you want to discuss, or you just want to throw your hands up and move on past that?
I'm sorry, what was the last bit?
I know you've had car issues this week. Did you want to tell us about that, or do you want to just throw your...
I spent like $1,100 in the last like 3 days trying to get my tags renewed. I forgot about emissions for a while, so that was $300+ to just get my emissions done, and then there was a larger stack of, I had a speed camera ticket from 2016 and like all of these various other things that caused me to drop a lot of money just so that I can renew my tags. It's good times.
Yay. Well, I guess at least it's done and over with, and now you gotta wait another couple
There's
years.
like 2 other places that I still have to contact that was like, oh yeah, our entire system is down today. Sorry, there's nothing I can do. You can't call on the phone. Yeah, we don't take cash at our, in-person location. And oh look, the online website is down too, so you just can't pay the bill. It's like, well, what use are you as a collection location if you can't do any of it?
And somewhere behind them on their phone is that guy from Airplane holding the plug going...
Right.
By the way, Wynn says... What's that, Robert?
How often do you have to renew your tags?
Every 2 years.
Okay.
In Virginia, it's yearly.
And it's only like $15. So the fact that I had to pay like $330 some dollars, yeah, like for every day that you're late, it's like $10 or $15 extra up to a certain point, and then it jumps to like $30 or something like that. It's kind of ridiculous.
Does it have a cap?
Nope.
So somebody could literally owe like tens of thousands of dollars?
Yep, if you take an old car that hasn't gone through admissions. Yeah. So, and they also made me go through the line twice, which was super annoying. It's like, I went through the first time, it passed, but because it expired 2 years ago and only good for 2 years, would put it being this June would be when it expired by, which is like kind of useless. So the guy was like, go drive around through the thing and wait through the line and go again. And I was like, can't you just scan it again? Since I'm literally right here. He was like, no. So I go through the line, back to his same line, get there, he goes, okay, great, let's scan you again. Oh, I need a manager override because it's been too, like, close amount of time since you went through the thing. I'm like, why didn't you just call the manager the first? Fine. Yeah.
I did apply for a job at DMV, just to let you know. Anyhow, Toei says, I was part of was part of a group video interview for season 2 of The Fakest that should be out on YouTube next week. Toei, that's awesome. If any of you guys don't know, Toei, please put up the YouTube link. She's part of basically a parody news site, a fake news site, which is called The Fakest. Robert, you might want to get in contact with. Every once in a while, they're looking for voice actors for different things.
Oh, cool.
So, when that might be something to keep in mind, is contact Robert. He does a couple different voices and is entertaining and witty and fun. And also, I'm still working on making that, basically the interview reel that I'm going to put on YouTube, so Bill can have a copy of that and decide if he wants to use any of my lame-ass voices. Which, that represents general middle America. Lame-ass. So, anybody else have exciting news in their life?
I'll be right back.
Okay.
That's exciting.
He might be going to get mead.
He could be.
Perhaps.
Could be. I'm telling you, this grapefruit beer crap, nah, it's not good.
Now, hold up the label now that I can see you moving and everything. Okay.
Well, I don't want us to get sued here.
Oh, it's you're allowed to have your opinion.
Okay. Well, I'm drinking it, and obviously I bought it, or my mom bought it.
Your mom bought you the beer because you're 12.
No, because I went to visit my mom this past week, took my kids to see her, and she wanted to get IPA for us to drink. She knew that I like IPAs, and she's like, "What do you like?" And I said, "Really, get anything. Get a sour, or get a really bitter IPA, or get a I don't know what else I told her. Well, this has grapefruit in it.
So she said, that's sour.
Yeah, this is not a sour. It does say IPA on it, and it's not the worst beer I've ever had. Like, I would rather drink this over, say, a Bud Light, but it's not my favorite.
Let me recommend this for you, Robert. I wish Elizabeth was able to join us tonight because she's going to be much more knowledgeable on this. There are a couple beers out there, and they're German in origin, but they're grapefruit beers. They're not like grapefruit flavored beer, but they're like drinking the Sprite of beers with a grapefruit, and they're really good. Well, like one was okay.
There are some grapefruit beers that are good.
Yeah, and okay, so you've had some. You know that this one just is not one of the good ones. Okay.
But I didn't tell my mom, hey, get a grapefruit beer.
No, of course you didn't. Who would do that? You pick out your own damn grapefruit beer. You don't tell somebody else to get you one.
Right. So, but it was nice. It was a nice trip. I can't say where she lives. She's like FBI witness relocation, all that kind of stuff. But
I did a stream last week at some point in time where I labeled it I Miss Phone Books. They were helpful and multifunctional, but now if you give out that kind of information, people will sue you for privacy invasion. It's good stuff, Chris. Now think about this. If anybody asks somebody else, tell me your full name, address, and phone number, they're going to attack you or run away in fear. You're going to get the fight or flight instinct out of that information.
Yeah, probably.
But, man, I wanted to do a whole show on why the fuck can't we have phone books anymore? I miss them. Now you gotta look people up on Facebook.
You can get most of that information on the internet. I mean, you can't just maybe there's a website. Who should I randomly call today?
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. Some rando from Idaho called me earlier.
Did any of you guys ever make friends in your younger years by a wrong number? Who like randomly called and you picked up the phone and then like weeks later you're still calling back and forth?
We didn't have phones.
Well, what about on your tin can of stream there, John? I mean, you're not you weren't born before 1880.
Correct. But remember, I didn't know we had a television until 1969. So.
Wait, you didn't know you had a television? Like you had one, but you didn't know about it?
Correct.
Yes. This is a good story. Go ahead, John. Tell it again.
My parents kept it up in their room. And so when they were deciding that they'd had enough of each other, everything comes down to get sold off because we're not going to take it to California with us. And the television comes downstairs and it's like, where did we get that? I knew televisions existed because my friends had them.
Right.
He saw them in the movies.
We had one. So.
He thought it was a sci-fi movie. What is that?
Yeah.
By the way, Wynn says...
We had a television growing up, but it wasn't connected to anything except for a VCR. So the only thing you could do was watch VHS movies on it.
Our entertainment was mostly get the hell out of the house. That was pretty much it.
I did both. And I had video games, and I had cable, and I did not have a VCR of my own, but By the way, Win
But now
says...
I can see the Fakest. Oh, that's pretty cool.
What's that?
Now I can go watch the Fakest. That's pretty cool.
You can. It's And Win says old city directories are even more fun. They'd say whether you rented or owned and what your occupation was. Well, shit, they'd have to change my listing like every 3 damn weeks. What's Travis doing this month? Fuck! Again? Keep a job, asshole. It's, assholes have shitty jobs.
God, this application is a mess.
Are you still at the Demonic Beast company?
Oh, I don't mind mentioning it, and it's no worse than any other job. They're just big corporation and they're faceless. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, I'm back there. I've been back for 2 weeks,
Okay.
so this is heading into week 3 tomorrow, and that's the job where I'm like, after spending all day there to come here and have 20 minutes time to get on the computer, run a game. That's not going to be productive, which is why I moved the game from Thursdays to Sundays. And then, like, every week, one of us has some shit going on, which... Somebody breathed in like
Well,
yeah.
in theory, even when we move back into the theater and the season starts, I should still be available Sunday evenings.
Good, excellent. It's next weekend is Andrea's birthday, and I thought since the drive-in wasn't happening, Sunday would be good, and she's like, no, we're doing stuff on Sunday. So let me just leave that up in the air and confirm later this week once I'm absolutely sure. And Robert, I know the week after that, you're taking on the 5th because of your wife's graduation.
Yeah. We'll probably go out to dinner or something. Her parents are coming in to town, and I mean, I don't know how long the graduation itself is, but I figure...
Safe than sorry. We can always drag you back in. Basically, whoever can't make it the night we finally play will be the run that runs off to tell everybody else, danger! That'll be our excuse to get that character out of the scene. So speaking of gaming,
I hope I'm there because the guy's on the front line.
With a hill giant he just made buddies with.
With a hill giant. Yeah, I mean, it's the two of us.
It's like the third guy you've ever met in your life that your character looks up to in a literal sense. Unlike the Rocairn over here, who just look up to really everybody. It's gnomes and halflings are almost extinct now. You guys haven't seen one of those in 15, 20 years.
It's because I keep stepping on them. I only see them after.
It's so let's talk about that. That game that we play, which was every Wednesdays and now in theory is moving to Sundays. It's called Stealing for Survival, and it takes place in the D&D world that I've built over the last three and a half decades. I've written short stories and novels in it. And it's a post-apocalyptic Dungeons and Dragons. So it kind of has a Mad Max Conan blend feel. Not so much where you guys are. You guys are in a little pocket that's relatively less tumultuous than the outside world. Though there's still some shit that apparently rolls downhill and catches you. Hey, Drop, how are you? Good to see you, man. It's, So I think that's one of the things with, and I guess we could define it. I don't think anybody here is not going to know what a role-playing game is, but my simplistic definition of a role-playing game, not everybody's going to know, but in case somebody on YouTube watches, it's like a group of friends getting together to tell a story, and one person lays out the world, and the others play one character in that story and tells how they react. Then there's dice for a random factor of when you try to hit or do damage or do certain things. Good enough simple explanation? Anybody feel that needs expanded on?
Not really. I mean, there's a lot of modern games that don't use dice anymore. But for a general introduction, that's and also the idea of group storytelling, group GMing has been experimented with varying degrees of success. But yeah, I think the basics is you are pretending to be someone else to tell a story, respond to the events that happen in the story, and you got rules. So it's like playing pretend with rules.
It's but there's no physicality to it, and I want to make that very clear. When you're pretending to be somebody else, it's only the voice acting. You're not getting up and doing the actions, and if you are, you're probably scaring the other players.
Well, I don't know. I mean, LARPing, that's
That's not
it's a different
tabletop
kind of-
role-playing games.
that's not tabletop. I'm
Right.
with you. Okay.
So let's not split hairs and break the
Or hit 'em with
generalities.
the
Let's.
tabletop.
But yeah, I
You
mean,
get
this
hit with a tabletop.
this is where I said this could definitely be a 3-hour topic, because we just go down every tangent we find. Well, we could be
Yeah.
here till Thursday.
But yes, if we're specifically saying tabletop role playing game, there's very little physicality.
There we go. Well, there's supposed to be very little physicality.
There's supposed to be very little physicality.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be. My group actually, my in-person group used to play with props a lot.
I love props. As a DM, whether it's music in the background, which I'm cautious about on Twitch because I don't want sound being bleeped out on the
Right.
replay. But I would always bring in, like little chests, little wooden chests full of jewels, or save
yeah.
liquor bottles for potions, and mix up my own potions, and specifically tell the player whether they can taste it or not. You can always look at it and smell it, but tasting. And I would keep notes of what I'd put in the bottles, so I knew if I ever presented that kind of potion again, it needed to be, crystal Pepsi or crystal meth, whatever.
That's
Half your time.
I like that. I like that.
It's,
The potion thing. I play a lot with actual physical coins,
I had
like-
one game
like
where
fantasy coins.
before any of you knew me, I had somebody over to my house who had done this. Yes, Chris?
I've got a couple. I've backed several Kickstarters of various fantasy coins that look super neat, and I've got like the dwarven ones, and what are some of the other ones that I did? I remember, and like because I was a Kickstarter, they sent me like an extra gold bar that had like the dwarven symbol that they were using for dwarven coins on it. It was super neat.
The way I did my coins, because I used to give players sacks of coins for my world, I used different sized washers that I spray painted copper or brass or left silver. Cords were actually wooden dowels, because cords in theory were woven golden threads. They were a golden cord, and they were about an inch and a half long, and they were just woven and imprinted with the different kingdoms. So yeah, I would make these out of wooden dowels that were ridged and just spray paint them gold. This is before social media and Kickstarters, and if you were going to do this stuff, you were going to a coin making place.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Now let's watch and do a blow by blow what he's going through.
So, in our modern game, which we're not playing right now, we were playing FBI agents, or maybe it was our Cthulhu game. The GM brought us all cigarettes. He actually tracked down candy cigarettes so that we could be smoking while we were interrogating the NPCs.
And then you can rub little
He was really big on props.
gum things on their arm to make them talk.
Right.
Burn them with your
right.
cigarette.
But-
Leave a little strawberry mark right there. It's
Which those candy cigarettes are gross. But it was kind of cool that you could still get them.
kind of like Bazooka Joe when you get the gum ones that have just the
Right, it was
paper
the gum
around them.
ones.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you could puff and a little powdered sugar comes out. And you
Yep,
chew it in for like
exactly.
8 seconds. It's fucking awesome. And then after 8 seconds, you're like, I've got a wad of... What the fuck is in my mouth? It's
Right. It
horrible.
was yes. Yeah.
Yep. Like fruit stripe gum.
Yeah, fruit stripe gum, which is awesome because you're like, I've got
I
this...
love
Z-
it for that first like 10 seconds. It's the best damn gum ever. And then
Yeah.
you're like, well, why did I put this in my mouth?
and juicy fruit. And there was some of them, I think it was like not Hubba Bubba, the Double Bubble. You'd put it in your mouth, and it was really sweet. Then it lost all its flavor. Like 20 seconds later, you're like, okay. And then it got hard as like chewing caulk. Dried caulk, not wet caulk.
Right. You're right. That was the double bubble.
Yeah,
Like the-
and you're just like, I can't even chew that if I want to.
yeah.
I'm slightly horrified, but I'm not letting go of it because I'm under puberty and I don't get candy very often. Because I haven't learned to steal from my parents and buy it on my own. Yeah, you're laughing because you did that. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. So, looking at the modern era, and at the 9 o'clock hour when we do This Week in History, we'll go into the past of role-playing games for everybody viewing. But with the modern era, there is so much out there. And by the way, the last half hour of the show, that's when I'd like to do the future of role-playing games. And this is when I want to bring up Critical Role at that point and discuss it. I know we're all right on the edge of talking about it anyway, because it's a very exciting thing.
It is very exciting.
It really is. It really is. And I know I've told you guys, well, let's not talk about Critical Role too much during the game because I don't want to lose viewers to that. But tonight, it's absolutely we're going to talk about them. Because...
Well, now if we're switching to Sundays, it's fine.
Right, well...
They're not on while we're streaming anymore.
It's, yeah, and apparently... But anyhow, we'll get to them in a little bit. With modern games, we had... I guess I have to go a little bit into the past. Starting in the 70s, they were kind of birthed. In the 80s, they diversified. You had different worlds, different games that covered different scenarios. In the 90s, we had a huge dip in it because everybody got way too technical in their rules, and money went weird, and comics oversaturated the market, and gaming did the same thing. They followed that pattern. So for the past 10 or 15 years, we've almost had a renaissance of gaming, where they're bringing back some of the old stuff redone. And now, John, you run a comic and game store. What are the big games that just sell?
For role-playing, obviously D&D is,
Okay, Win.
Once 5th edition started, it put everything else to shame.
Now, I beta tested 5th edition before it came out. It's a matter of fact, Robert, you remember Dan. Were you in the game that I was beta testing?
I ran a beta test game that you were in.
Okay, so that's probably why I had the rules. And Win, in case you didn't hear me, we'll see you in about 45 minutes. She's popping off to support another stream.
Traitor. Have fun.
By the way, you guys don't know, Win actually did writing for Tunnels and Trolls in the 80s, as well as writing for the Grimtooth Traps books.
Cool.
So, yeah, she's part of the role-playing game industry. She's not necessarily... Oh, and I did play World of Warcraft with a woman who tested Dungeons & Dragons with Gary Gygax before he ever published it. She play-tested it.
Cool.
And she got her children and her grandchildren into D&D and World of Warcraft. She was fun.
Better.
Yeah.
She was one of those players you kind of had to take by the hand and lead them from point A to point B. But I don't blame that on anything. Then that's just how she is. I've had other friends like that too. Andrea's like that.
Right. Now, we're pretty fortunate too in our Tuesday group. We try different games. We run Star Wars, we run Dresden, we run Savage Worlds. So, then Twilight and some other games that might be coming out soon.
Twilight, as in...
Wait.
The military one from the 80s, which was called Twilight 2000?
Has a nice...
Oh, Purgatory House. That's one of my games.
It is.
Yeah, and there's another one that Infernium that we're going to be playing Thursday. So.
Oh, awesome. Starship
Any
Inferno.
Vampire of the Masquerade games going? I know it's making a resurgence.
Well, it has to because when they basically went to print to order, it's hard for us as a store and you can't get books.
Mm,
and that's a sad thing because Dungeons and Dragons went through that. If Wizards of the Coast didn't purchase TSR, we went 6 to 8 months without being able to get a book from them because they were basically bankrupt, if you ask me. So.
Yep.
Now, Chris, just so you know, when I was doing my steampunk monster hunting game, that was all the White Wolf system. It was Vampire, Hunters Hunted, whatever the other thing is called, The Reckoning. Hunter the Reckoning. because I love that D10 system where you have a primary statistic and then a skill, and you add how many points in each and roll that many dice. I just love the simplicity and the ease that system gives, but it's still detailed enough. It's
I think those games suffer sometimes from the player base of it.
mm-hmm.
But you're running a Vampire the Masquerade and somebody wants to play a werewolf. You're playing werewolf and somebody wants to play a ghost, and it's like the power structure is so different between those things.
Well, and the games were never actually written to have players
absolutely
interact
right
in that manner. That
correct.
That if you were playing Vampire, the werewolves were supposed to be NPCs, and they didn't pull out the werewolf book to run a werewolf.
But I'm saying predominantly somebody wanted to, though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's no different from D&D when I threw down the, hey, we've got the player's handbook, and you guys are like, and can I use this and this and this and this and this? And I'm like,
But that's far worse in the Masquerade system. I mean,
well, it's because
So
the games
all
are
of-
not
all of
balanced to
those-
each other.
Yeah.
Who's using
All of
a
those
leaf
follow at least the
blower
same rules.
after dark.
That's how I
that
clean my
guy
gutters.
right there, down there, the guy with the leaf blower.
Oh, we hear it now.
Yeah.
Now, if you hadn't called it out as a leaf blower, it could have been something else.
That's right. From the sound we're getting, it's just a buzzing hum.
Yeah, there's two people like what are they leaf blowing? I fucking
Oh,
Each other, maybe.
hopefully leaves. Grass clippings.
Could be a lot of giggling later. I don't know. Hard to say. There's a guy on YouTube that cleans computers with a leaf blower. All right, whatever.
I met
So,
a professor in college who used to sweep a stage by using a leaf blower, and it's like all you did was just blow all of that dust
Straight
up in
up.
the air, so
Yeah,
it'll
and-
resettle again.
But it's not on the floor right here.
That's right.
Probably not during this episode, but Chris, I need to tell you my my assistant stage manager with the shop vac story at some point.
All right.
Do you want to tell it
Go
now?
ahead.
I mean, I could tell it now.
Go ahead.
You
If we
could.
segue into that, it has nothing to do with role playing games.
Welcome to Talk of the Tavern.
Yeah, I was the production stage manager for the Orlando Shakespeare Festival for about 6 years, and had an intern one time that this was before I got to hire my own interns. They insisted on interviewing and hiring interns for me. And this girl had gone to college for theater, had been stuck in the box office, didn't even know what a stage manager was, and they hired her to be my assistant. All right, so she tells me after the second week she hasn't heard a word I've said in 2 weeks because she's deaf in one ear, and that's the side she chose to sit on. So I would turn to her and tell her something. She hadn't heard anything. And I, at this point, hate this woman. All right? Well, because she hadn't done a damn thing I've asked her to do for 2 weeks. We were opening The Tempest. That was our first show in our new big theater, and it had a big sandbox. So it was 3/4 round with a huge sandbox in the middle, and the sandbox had to be raked like a Zen garden, and the rest of it was planking and decking like a ship. So her only job beforehand was to go around and shop vac out all of the hooks and things that different pieces of scenery had to go into, because they had to be free of sand, so everything would just go. All right.
So you're
she's
saying
out
she
there
had one
vacuuming.
job.
One job. She had one job. She had to vacuum the hardware, essentially. Okay? One job. So at about half hour till the theater opens, the house opens, which is an hour before the show starts, I check and she's vacuuming. I'm like, okay, great. All right. 15 minutes later, she's still vacuuming. Like, okay, that's fine. As long as she's done 5 minutes before I got to open the house, we're fine. 5 minutes before we got to open the house, she's still vacuuming. And I'm like, what is going on out here? And she goes, well, the vacuum won't suck any of this sand up. And I'm like, what do you mean the vacuum won't suck sand up? That's the whole purpose of the vacuum. So I go and I look at it and I'm like, all right. I didn't even remember this girl's name, but I'm like, okay, The vacuum has two settings, suck and blow. And you have been on blow the last half hour. And she goes, oh shit, and kicks the vacuum, the shop bag. It tips off of the decking into the sandbox on blow, top falls off, and it blows staples and glass and all sorts of stuff all through my sand pit, which the actors are now going to have to walk on barefoot.
Of course.
So I fired her right then and there. I'm like, get the fuck out of my theater. They hired her back about 10 minutes later because I didn't have the authority to fire anybody. But I was so pissed because then I had to go out with a shop vac and basically vacuum the sand pit. Yeah.
Again.
Again. Yeah.
Sandpit's always fun.
Well, you know,
we had a show a couple of seasons
But
ago.
you didn't notice when she was first vacuuming that she was just blowing stuff around?
She didn't notice. I never got close enough to check.
Oh, okay.
Because I there's so much that you have to do before a show. I'm like, okay, she's doing her job. Good. We gave her the easiest job because it's the only really thing she could do. She eventually did get fired for real.
Let me say this, though. For a woman that blows, there are careers out there for her.
Oh my goodness. So when she got fired, and she legit got fired for breaking into the front office and stealing money out of the secretary's desk, they had her on camera. So she legit got fired. In her firing interview, whatever they call that, when they bring somebody in to fire, she tried to tell them that I locked her in a closet, swore at her, and beat her with a broom, trying to keep her job. So my boss, the production manager, comes to me and goes, remember that notebook I told you to keep of every time you had to talk to this girl about something? I'm like, yep, I got it right here. So he took it back, and they're like, okay, yeah, Robert didn't do anything. We're fine. Her mother, and this is like a 35-year-old woman, her mother came into town to argue for her job.
Came into
She's
town,
big
like
game
from where,
resident.
Iowa?
From Alabama.
Oh my
From
god.
Alabama to Orlando, Florida. So it's about by driving, it would have been at least a 9-hour drive.
Now, hold on a second. Let me say hello to Matthew, who just gave us a follow. Good to see you, Matthew. And here's an opening toast. Here's to the creativity amongst friends.
Sure.
You're here. And knowing the settings on your vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, a vacuum. Oh my
So it
goodness.
I had a
doesn't go.
Facebook memory go up today that was me using a shop vac to suck up water in a flooded bathroom at the theater 6 years ago? 5 years ago?
Woo!
Yeah. Gotta love when those memories pop back up on Facebook.
Yeah. So make sure, I mean,
5
if
years,
it's
though.
if the water's been in there for 5 years, you probably just want to throw out that vacuum.
That's true. It
'Cause
does.
that's grown some mold.
Your story does remind me of Spaceballs.
Yeah, with the vacuum cleaner
Yeah.
on the planet, sucking
Yeah.
out the.
With Mighty Maid or whatever it is. Yeah, she's gone from
So-
suck to blow.
Supposedly, I read something that there's a Spaceballs 2 in production now.
I'd have to see
I'll
that.
have to look it up.
It's,
I don't know how I feel about that.
it's been a constant joke since, of course, the end credit scene with it. And Mel,
Right.
like, nope, never intended to do that. But when Star Wars
Right.
released
With
Episode
yogurt
7,
in the search for more money.
that is the most Russian yogurt I have ever heard.
Well, Russian, Jewish.
Makes me want to watch Fiddler on the Roof. Anyhow, going back to
Back
the gaming
to
stuff.
roleplay.
Yeah,
games.
back to the
Back to
gaming
role
stuff.
playing games.
And just for anybody who's listening going, what the fuck, I'm watching for role-playing games. If you've played role-playing games, you know this is how a game often goes anyway. we don't do this on our Sunday stream of the games. We tend to stay actually, we do a hell of a job staying on topic and in-game.
Well, I mean, we steer off topic in character.
And that's, in my mind, a perfect way to go off topic. Just keep it in character.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Matthew says I can agree. But Talk of the Tavern is full of tangents anyway. So we've had many people go, where's the topic? Well, it was here. It'll be back eventually.
It's over there somewhere.
We're going to go pick it up. It's passed out in the corner. So with gaming nowadays, it has branched out, and I don't necessarily want to discuss LARPs on this show, or it's even gone into our video games like World of Warcraft. It's gone into card games. Not that that's role playing, but it's where a lot of role players, new generation role players, went. And how are we bringing new role players actually into tabletop role playing games and getting them away from video games and card games and stuff?
Is that a segue to pimp my next project?
It can absolutely be that,
Yeah.
because that's
I
actually
mean, I
your-
also feel like shows like Critical Role
Mhm.
and those sort
Yeah.
of things are definitely bringing the younger generation back around, even though it's not necessarily family friendly
Right.
all the
Well,
time.
I mean, Critical Role, Stranger Things. So I noticed,
That
I
too.
don't know if John noticed this last year. Stranger Things had a huge resurgence for people interested in Dungeons and Dragons, parents remembering playing Dungeons and Dragons and getting it for their kids. Last year at the Lexington Comic Con, role-playing game sales at a Comic Con were through the roof because they had a guest from Stranger Things and they had the Dungeon Master from Critical Role. I don't remember his name. Those two
Matthew.
people were there, Matt Mercer, were there signing stuff, and everybody wanted, they're like, oh, is this like Stranger Things?
Hold on one
Well,
second. I'll be right-
sort
Okay.
of.
Keep going, Robert.
So, yeah, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons has come back into pop culture, and because Dungeons and Dragons is now popular again, kind of allows all of the indie role-playing game creators like myself to kind of ride that wave,
Real
get in
quick.
front of people.
St. Matthew 68, if you're actually Matt Mercer, do let us know so we can, incorporate that into our discussion.
No, you
Yeah, I
said
gave you some kudos
Stranger
here.
Things D&D.
There
Oh
you go.
yeah, Stranger Things D&D, the box set.
So, yeah, they were.
I did see a mug that I'd like, but I'd rather have it on a T-shirt. It said "World's Okayest DM," and I'm like, I'd
World's
be able to.
okay
Use it.
to you?
It's okay,
So
Matthew.
our
You're,
local schools allowing D&D and stuff now too. So maybe
Yeah,
as
there's the Dragons
teachers and
clubs.
stuff start letting things back in. RCC and Thomas Nelson, they're starting to set up clubs and stuff too. So,
Yep.
and I've actually run for RCC off of Discord and stuff on a Monday. So
they're not terrified. It's the devil's game, right up there with heavy metal and rap.
Not anymore.
Well,
Not so much. I actually read the other day someone was talking about they started a D&D group at their school, which is mostly like Spanish speakers and that sort of thing. And there was a girl that came up to the gentleman who was running the club, who was the DM for the kids, and was like, my English is not so good. I don't think I can play. And they tweaked it so that she was like High Elven and made the Elven language Spanish so that she could still be included, practice her English with talking with the other players. And since most of them, understood Spanish anyway, and managed to get this young girl who wanted to play and got her to keep playing even though like the language barrier was there, which I thought was a
Yes.
brilliant idea.
and that what makes role-playing games so great is DMs that can think on their feet.
Yeah.
They can take situations and go anywhere with them.
See, going into John's
Not locked
history,
into something specific.
one thing I've always liked about the gaming is, though it's a nerd culture thing, or has been in the past, not as much nowadays, it's always been very inclusive, where anybody who isn't necessarily mainstream popular can have a social group to interact with. Creativity is big in it, and folks who want to kind of make their own story instead of just watch one on TV or on the big screen can be a part of it. And John, I mentioned you specifically because you have a story about how you started playing and the social culture around that. Do you want to spit that out now?
So back in college, I wasn't known for my studying habits. I was known more for being able to catch a ball and tackle people. But anyways, Dungeons and Dragons had just started, and we're playing on the weekend, and this other fraternity decided it was okay to go make fun of the dorks playing the game they were playing. Well, as they kicked the door open and their eyes got about this big around as they saw the linebackers and the defensive linemen playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time. And then we dragged them back to the fraternity and explained to their president why it wasn't probably necessary for them to come and bother our fun.
No,
So
I love it.
John, how
we were
long
expecting
have you been playing?
since '74.
Since 74. Robert?
I want to say probably 84 or 86. My first game was the Red Box Basic Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
Since then,
Oh, go ahead. Robert?
I actually went on Wikipedia for the comprehensive list of role-playing games, which I would say does not have a lot of indie games in the last 5 years. I went through to see how many games I've actually played, not just read, but actually played. 72 off of their list.
Wow.
That's how many I've actually played.
Wow.
What about you, Chris? How long you been playing? When you started?
Early 2000s. My first, maybe 2004, 2005, right when I got into college. Like, I just didn't have anyone to play with in high school, even though I had the red box starter set,
Okay.
partially because I liked the little figures,
Right.
and
Yeah.
was like, I want to collect the minifigs. So yeah, that's when I think I started
And
somewhere.
I started on my 13th birthday, which was in 84. And that Christmas, so a month later, my friend got a D&D. I started with the red box. So after a month and a half, bang, we were on to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is technically second edition, to clarify. So, and for our viewers, our ages in this group range from, Chris, you're mid-30s, right?
Early 30s.
Early
I turned
30s.
33 this year.
Okay, yeah, or early 30s, and John, late 60s. So we have a 30-plus year play range, which is something, again, looking at the diversity and inclusiveness, there's nothing to stop that huge age difference. And we've played games with my son when he was, well, hell,
Right.
12, 11, and now he's 16. And Robert, actually, this is a great time to pimp your upcoming project, which you were about to do, speaking of bringing younger people in. You want to touch on that?
So I am an independent role-playing game designer. I've made a card game as well, but mostly I enjoy making role-playing games. And my next project is actually, I wrote it for my kids. My son's in 3rd grade, my daughter's in 6th grade. And we had tried some other sort of kid-friendly role-playing games. Either they didn't like them or I didn't like them for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I just decided, my son he didn't want to play my scary horror games that I was writing, Purgatory House, Starship Infernum. So I started thinking about a game that would work for them. And that's what I've created. It's called Scouts of the Weirdwood Forest. And it's a family-friendly adventure storytelling game that's going to be on Kickstarter on May 14th.
Now, once that
So-
Kickstarter
and it's-
succeeds, which I know it will, what's going to be retail for that game?
Retail's going to be between $35 and $40.
So the average
we have-
retail price for a core rulebook.
For a core rulebook, and it is going to be hardcover. I only do hardcover games just because I want them to hold up and last to people using them.
I like
It is
that.
going to be full color. So this will be our first full color game. So costs are a little bit higher than my past 2 games. Okay, costs are almost triple my last 2 games because I did them as black and white, even though I still did it hardcover.
Do you have those there?
It's like,
Your first 2 games?
John just held them up. I've got Starship Infernum on my shelf right now.
If you guys would both hold up, there's Starship Infernum. And John, do you have the other one? I think John may have frozen.
Yep,
No,
there it
he's
is.
pulling up.
Oh.
It's going up. So those were my second and third role playing game. My first one is out of print, although you can still get it at Drive Through RPG. That was Are You Mental, which was about lunatic superheroes.
Oh, quick tangent. Amazon Prime has a television series made by the guys who made Supernatural and Preacher, and I think it has the actor from Preacher in it, called The Boys. And basically I've often stated superheroes, if they existed, would be like our football players, our rock stars, and a lot of them would probably be assholes. And this is what
Right.
that show focuses on, and the guy who basically puts them in their place.
Oh, cool.
So
And it's on Amazon?
yeah, go catch the trailer on YouTube. The Boys is what it's called. It looks very inappropriate, very adult. It looks great.
Gotcha.
Well, it is a comics.
Is it? Okay.
The boys, yeah. Yeah, they go around, they boot stomp superheroes that are jerks.
Oh, cool.
They have a dog that will, needless to say.
Hump their legs.
All of the boys, some superhero did something to somebody in their family or to them.
Gotcha.
Oh.
So they're around to keep them in check, kind of.
Interesting.
Sort of like Sons of Anarchy, only superheroes.
Well, kind of, yeah, I guess.
John,
They're not superheroes.
John,
Oh, they're not superheroes.
John, for me, your camera is frozen, which means on the stream it's frozen. Would you do me a favor and just turn off your camera and turn it right back on, and let's see if that fixes it? Apparently it's working for you guys, so it could be my wonderful internet connection. Perfect. Thank you, John. I can see you moving again. Good. It's,
So, Robert, have you played Mystics and Mice and Mystics?
Mice and Mystics, yeah, the board game.
Yeah, the like board game RPG. How did you
Yes,
feel
I
about that?
have. I don't think it's a very good kids game. I think it's a decent game, but it's actually very complicated. At least in my take of it. My kids have played it twice, and they enjoyed it. But I have actually heard, I have not gotten to play it. There is another game that's like the spiritual sequel to Mice and Mystics. That's laid out like a storybook, and the pages flip open and form the map or something. I'm gonna have to look up what it's called. I have heard that for playing as a family, for playing with kids, that is a much better game. Mice and Mystics is a cool game. I don't know that it's looks like a family-friendly game, and it's a little bit too complicated. I think once you maybe hit high school, you can handle that game if you're part of a gaming family. It was a little too advanced for my kids.
And I think they have Hero Kids for the superhero kind of genre too, which is
So Hero Kids
kids'
came
favorite.
out 5 or so years ago, and it's a
Wow.
great game. That's one I played with my kids when they were younger. My problem with Hero Kids, not with Hero Kids, my problem with every kids game out there, and the reason I went in a different direction with Scouts of the Weirdwood Forest, is every game was kill the monster, get its stuff. I mean, pretty much. Hero Kids, all of them, it's all combat oriented. It's all about teaching kids how to do combat to move them into Dungeons and Dragons.
I
which is
attribute a lot of
fine.
that to video games, MMOs and whatnot, which is why my game,
Yep.
I like it when we have whole sessions where we only roll dice a couple times, because then it's
Yeah.
problem solving and personality. Go on, Robert, about your game.
So the game I'm working on now, it does not it's not a combat focused game. It's not about killing things. It's you become scouts in an enchanted wood, and you're helping things and solving problems. You could do combat if you really wanted to. The system will support that, but it's discouraged. That's not the point of the game.
Well, it's like real life. If you imagine Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, they might learn archery, but they're not out there killing things.
Right. So,
Hopefully.
And I don't have any problem with Dungeons & Dragons. I love Dungeons & Dragons. I think it's a great game. I wanted there to be an option that teaches and gets people into the hobby from a non-combat standpoint, where they're thinking through problems and they're doing puzzles and they're learning about the stats and the dice and all of that without having to approach it of, oh, here's a goblin, let's kill it.
Which is why I like gaming with you. I was very particular about the players I have, because I don't want players to be only rules and only combat. I want you guys to be able to do something besides draw a weapon and attack things. Attacking things is fine, definitely an option. It's on the table. But it doesn't need to be the first option.
Yeah, I can't wait until we go to another town and I can get into a drunken bar fight.
You could do that here.
I mean, yes, but it won't be as much fun.
You could take on
You know
Vin
what,
and Van.
Bagai? Yeah, Bagai will have a drunken bar fight with you.
That's right. Might not even be on the same side. It'll be fun.
Yeah. If you need to practice a drunken bar fight, he's your guy.
I don't know, but I could take you down. Challenge issued.
All right, we
See
now
that-
know what the next session is.
Well,
Don't let the beer tender know.
Yeah, forget the basilisk storming the city. We've got a score to settle.
Invite him in.
that's
Right.
Come get
Mr.
stoned
Giant,
with
you are now
us.
the referee.
That's right.
Come
Actually,
watch this.
the priest of Joneth might be a very good referee for this sort of thing. There is a god of combat, Tor, who's but he's not the god of war. He's the god of combat, like finesse and fighting and whatnot. So it's war falls under his domains, but it's not necessarily his primary thing. So and there's also holy days to him. Maybe we'll find a holy day for him, and that could be when you guys are like, time to beat the shit out of each other.
All right.
Find that town that's got a bare knuckle brawl festival.
We'll go find Thunderdome for you. Attach you to huge rubber bands and hand you a pike.
Oh, we'll make Thunderdome, and the mage can sell tickets.
And he would. It's
Make it American Gladiator style. Oh, that ridiculousness.
okay. We've got
They
about
tried to bring it back, and it didn't do as well because they made it safer. Like, they actually, made you wear extra padding instead of just,
but now they also
You're not
have
watching the
the
new one
giant
with.
Q-tip on a pole.
Oh,
but they actually do have a medieval fighting tournament thing that's televised now.
Yes.
So which I haven't
Oh.
seen. Which let me
What is
interrupt.
it?
We have 4 minutes till the top of the hour where we're going to go into This Week in History and talk about the past of role-playing games. Does anybody need a quick break? John, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll grab some water.
Okay, you guys go. I will stare at the screen awkwardly. It's let me see who's still here with us. I think Wynn is still off traipsing about. Oh, Gary popped in. Hey, Gary. And of course, we still have Matthew with us. A few others. Looks like it's mostly bots and us, as it will be. It's so as I was saying, this is something I wanted to do largely because Critical Role hit their goal. And having played for 35 years and running a game on Sunday, I felt like this was a great topic for us to discuss and bring into play here. It's now Gary, I believe you've played, but it was many years ago. And Matthew, you're I'm guessing a gamer because the topic drew you in to watch. So, what do you guys like to play? Or do you still play, or is it something in the past? Sorry, one of my cats. I have many. Oh, Chris is back. That was quick. And he brought a pair of pants with him. Robert got his snacks. There we go. AD&D in the early 80s. See, that's when I started.
I got jelly beans.
You know, I didn't even think to grab jelly beans, but now that they'll be on sale, I think I'll actually buy some. Just one bag. It's
So Target tonight was almost out of them.
it's the day after. It's clearance. Matthew, I had that same problem. Robert is in Ohio. When we play online, we all play from our own homes, which is nice because we get a full game session. And I don't have to clean up after everybody leaves, which is one of the major frustrations when you host a game. You're like, I don't care how careful people are, I have to fucking clean up when they leave. So,
The first game I hosted as an adult in our apartment. No, it was a house. It was a house we had bought in Oregon, my wife and I. We had bought a brand new couch. This guy came over and broke our couch.
was he a
At the
standard
Dungeons and
big
Dragons
guy type gamer?
Yeah, he was a large fellow. He was a large fellow. He didn't do it on purpose,
No.
but
I have had friends
Yeah.
who, especially, a couple of my larger friends, and by large I mean fat, to be clear. who do not sit on furniture. They throw themselves on furniture. And I'm like, really?
Right.
What are you doing?
That's what happened. We had played at a mutual friend's house a bunch of times. And we decided, oh, you know what? You've hosted it all these months. We'll host it. We'll take a turn hosting at our house. Yeah, that was the only time we hosted at our house for that group.
I used to host. I had special rooms set up that looked like taverns. The one game I was going to tell you about earlier, this guy who had recorded multiple CDs before even YouTube existed, he later interviewed in a magazine about his bands, and he talked about my D&D game. He's like, there was nothing more impressive than when Travis rolled out his 9-foot hand-drawn map and held it open by putting a sword on each side. So that goes back to our prop conversation. I love props. I love miniatures. I love all these things. But you can't quite do it the same online. But there's other advantages. Now, let me play the intro to This Week in History.
This week in history.
Now, let me read Gary's comment. Gary, who's Pepper Garden for Matthew and anybody else that doesn't know. Gary says, this was for about 2 years and I was a deadhead. The rest of the crew were geeky, brainy types. The most fun I've had, well, like the top 5 besides sex. I think that says a lot. It's, again, the people you can bring together. Oh, Donna, it's great to see you. I see you in the thing. I try not to call you out. Great to see you. And if you prefer to be called something else besides the last syllable of the thing there, let me know. Started with Redbox in '84, then AD&D, Cyberpunk 2020. Played until I left the Navy in the early '90s. Which, by the way, there's a Cyberpunk MMO coming out. Oh, wait a minute. I don't think it's an MMO. I think it's like a first-person shooter. And it's like Cyberpunk 2077 or something. Looks good. I probably won't play it. Tony, you got it. Now, Tony, remind me of that shit next time. If you don't talk to me for a few weeks and you pop back in, I may not remember Tony. So, good. We got John back. And now I want to, once John gets his headsets on. Oh, yes, I know, Otter. Wait, that's what I said. Okay. I want to go into the history of gaming, and not just the history of the industry, but our histories also. This is where we get to reminisce about some of our best games. And I'll start with a quick list of what I remember playing. Matthew says, and the name subject, Maddie. Okay, Maddie, no problem. Maddie's a girl. There you go. And Maddie, again, if you come in on a regular basis, I'll remember this. If you're gone for a few weeks, get to remind me. It's not you, it's me. So, in the 80s, after Dungeons & Dragons, I ended up making my own world because as a teenager, 13 to 15 years old, I didn't have a job where I can just go buy books every month. When Forgotten Realms was big, and Greyhawk, I actually did have the Greyhawk box set. Loved their plastic maps. They were so nice. But also played Marvel, played Toon, played Traveler, a little bit of Starfleet. The one with you had to lay it out on grid paper and mark like the shields off and stuff like that. I forget the name.
Starfleet Battles.
Thank you. Starfleet Battles.
And
Gamma World.
Battletech.
Never played Battletech. Had other friends that did that. Never did Warhammer. I still like Toon.
Because that shit's expensive.
Yeah, exactly. And it really
I wanted to get into Warhammer in middle school. I think was the first time I had walked by like the Games Workshop had just opened up in the mall. You know, this was the mid to late 90s, and I was out with my parents. Was like, oh yeah, I want to see this. What is these cool minis in the window? Let's go in. And I was all about it. And then my parents saw how much a box of the basic starter box of minis cost, and they were like, yeah, no.
Well, off topic, well, kind of, but similar to that. When a Magic the Gathering player complains how much a GW box is, miniatures are. I said, that's the same price as that box you just bought.
Right.
Yep.
Well, yeah,
Of
well, that was the
cards.
thing. At that point, I was already doing Magic the Gathering and Pokemon.
Right. So,
A little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh, but that came later because fuck Yu-Gi-Oh. You heard me.
speed
There
duels
was
now. You can go back to the old speed duels. Talent.
There was a board game that was put out by the same people I think that did Hero Quest.
Talisman.
No, not Talisman. It was. I mean, I have Talisman, the board game.
It's a
I
great
actually
board
wrote
game.
on Talisman. I wrote on Talisman, the role playing game, which is coming out very soon. But no, it was like Warhammer, but it wasn't Warhammer. It was all the armies, and you had a boulder and a catapult that you threw, and
Just Hero Quest was owned by Citadel or Games Workshop. If
Right.
you look in the Hero Quest box set, that was their minis, their guys.
right, they're Chaos Warrior. Yeah.
Correct. So
I wish I could remember. I still have it up in the attic.
I
wish could
remember
what
that
other-
game.
you talking about the ones with the catapult launching thing?
Yeah, it was
Um,
called Battle Masters, I think.
Yeah, I've got it in the side room.
I tell you what, I was
People
thrilled
pay crazy money for those though.
when WizKids came out with their miniatures that were like Hero Clicks, but they were medieval fantasy. Now they were too
That was
large.
the first ones.
Well, they were too large for like real miniatures, but I used the hell out of them anyway because you could get a bunch for a low price. And I'm like, I don't care if they don't fit the squares on the map. We're using them.
Right.
Just find bigger graph paper.
That's right.
Holy.
Well, it did. You just broke them off the base.
I bet that doesn't show up on there, does it?
The
Yeah.
Battle Master? Yeah, it does.
I
It's a
remember
nice
that. Yep, there we
big
go.
thick box and
Oh yeah, it had a big map in it, and
crappy rubber bands and
you know. But that had like units in it, kind of like Warhammer units. It was mounted elves and stuff like that. That's still up in the attic somewhere.
So what other
Well,
games
but-
did you play early in your gaming careers?
Who?
Well, let's start with John because John's got
Yeah.
a couple years on us.
John's the oldest.
well, the so when D&D came out, it was actually rather unique, and as you said with Toei, the tunnels and trolls and a lot of those types of things. Chaosium had come out at the same time.
Right, which was
And,
very
They
complicated.
had a book called All the World's Monsters. And what they did was they went to all the fantasy things and just stole stuff out of people and were putting them, and they got told to cease and desist. And,
I remember the deities and demigods they had to pull back.
and TSR kind of went through the same thing.
Mhm.
And then they decided that they wanted to copyright everything. But after the fantasy genre kind of died off a little bit, you had games like Aftermath, like I should,
In Twilight 2000.
Twilight 2000. And then a couple science fiction games came in, Traveler, in a wide variety of that.
What was the
The-
one that was? It was TSR, and you can actually play it with Gamma World or Dungeons and Dragons.
Spelljammer?
No, not Spelljammer. This was an actual sci-fi. They had like Vrusks, which were like an insect type race. They had the blob type race. Remember from the Flintstones? They're called like Drazoids or something like that.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. I just can't.
Yeah.
It's at the top
But they all
tip of my
used the
tongue.
basic same 6 stats, and you could move a character from system to system, which
Right.
was kind of cool.
And-
Star Frontiers. Thank you, Tony.
Yep. Then the first superhero game, I mean, you had Marvel superheroes,
Hmm.
but there was a Villains and Vigilantes, which was put out that, you're trying to play a game and they don't even have all the stats in the. It's like, who put this out? It's, Traveler was unique in that you could die in character creation, so yeah.
Oh.
It seemed odd.
ICE did that with the Tolkien game, too. Their
Oh,
critical
Lord.
hit table was terrifying. Like, you could be
Well,
like level 1 and
all
missing
ICE
limbs.
was tables.
Mhm.
And then so you go through GURPS and RIFs and a lot of those type of things, which I like their source material for those books. You can't go out of your way to be different to where it's hard to play the game itself.
I agree.
Was what you ran into with like Champions and some of those games.
And some of them got so math heavy, even though I actually enjoyed math in school, I didn't want to play a game with that much damn math.
Right.
I tell you what, one that had a similar basis to the White Wolf games was, really? I can't remember the name.
Shadowrun?
Thank you. Shadowrun. D6's same concept. You had a stat, you had a skill, you combined it. That combat system.
I, in theory, technically have a Shadowrun game still going, even though we haven't played since November.
Well, the original.
Here's my dice pool.
Yeah.
Get my bucket out.
It like 15 seconds of comment, because it was like 3-second rounds or something, could take 2 hours. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Great concept. Loved the world design. Hated the combat system.
Oh yeah.
Now, I would say I'm not necessarily the typical D&D guy.
Mm-hmm.
I've always liked the new systems as they come out, where we've got a lot of guys that they tend to are stuck on whatever game they learned it up. So you could be an advanced guy, you could be a 3.5 guy,
Right.
4th edition, 5th edition, or whatever. I mean, a guy was in here yesterday, how much 4th edition sucked, and it's like...
Really, he's like one of 3 guys that are stuck on 4th edition then.
You know, and it's like, I liked each one, and I could tell you what was good about that particular version of the game.
Yeah.
So what was good
it all
about
revolves
4th?
around the person that's telling the story anyway.
True.
So
True.
we have a campaign that's been going on for 25 years. And when a new system comes out, or a new version of D&D, we have what's called the darkening. The skies go dark, there's magic ruins everywhere. And all of a sudden these new beings show up. Dragonborn, new races. Actually, I add races, and we actually add new religions and stuff just to see if they survive. And some of my player characters, the murder hobos that they are, have killed off some of these races that were brought in during the darkening. So I looked at it more like the Well World series, where it was a planet that you kind of saw how things survived and things. So, but that's what's great about role-playing games is I don't know any genre that you can't role-play in, really.
And GURPS definitely tried to cover that by going,
Yeah.
here's the basics, now we have...
And Savage Worlds is probably the best for that.
It is. Savage Worlds is really good. for
GURPS
that.
was a bit math heavy also, so yeah, it never caught on with me. So yeah, glad to hear somebody else. You guys ever play Torg?
Oh, yeah.
Torg was a great concept. It took our modern Earth, and basically where you have potential energy, there was possibility energy, of possibilities that can happen. And there were evil beings from other dimensions or universes who basically would throw energy bridges to Earth to try to latch onto it. They got thrown off. There was so much energy. So they teamed up, and they hit certain regions of the world with these bridges. So England turned into a medieval fantasy world. Most of the eastern half of the United States, of North America, turned into a dinosaur land. Then you had pulp fiction in northern Africa. So you had your very starter superheroes and Indiana Jones type stuff going on, and India turned into gothic horror. Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to develop that in a new game that we're called Merge. Basically, it's the current version of it, Earth, science, and magic, and the noir psionic things all exist now.
Mm-hmm.
What's nice is you have one core book, but you can also play the other 3 previous versions. So you can play the fantasy version, because it was basically Earth split into 3 different dimensions. And then it was merged back together, and you can play, whatever version you want.
I love the combo games like that. It's no,
I love the games that have a good story behind them, though, too. A lot of them nowadays is here's your mechanics, make your own, have fun.
Right. Well, a lot of systems like Fate or whatever it's Fate. Fate's the current incarnation of that. But
Fate more.
So, GURPS. I want to touch on GURPS really.
Now, for our viewers,
don't touch it. No. You get a disease.
Before you go, Robert, give them a little bit about your background with goblins, at least 2-3 sentences, And Tony,
Oh, but
I saw that Kickstarter for Torg, and I was very excited, but I'm not going out and buying every book I can. I try to stick with one game. That way we could build on it, it could advance and get somewhere instead of
right.
every third week you got a new game and new characters. Okay, Rob, go on.
So, like I said, started with the red box. My dad bought it for me after he and my mom got divorced
Maddie knows
at
you.
Christmas.
Maddie
Oh,
just typed
okay.
out Gandersnitch.
She
Oh,
does,
yeah.
right there.
All right.
So there you go. Go on.
So, yeah, you want me to talk about Gandersnitch?
Well, yeah, your connection, your career in Goblin.
So I have, for the past 9-10 years, been a professional goblin. I played a character called Gandersnitch the Goblin and dressed up and performed at festivals and did storytelling and did radio shows and game shows,
Including a
and all
year or
sorts
two
of
on
stuff.
Talk of the Tavern as Gandersnitch. It's
Including
before
as
video.
Gandersnitch.
I remember those shows.
Yeah, and I wrote a couple of books as Gandersnitch the Goblin. And then I segued sort of into writing and publishing my own role-playing games. And it actually came out of Gandersnitch the Goblin because Gandersnitch the Goblin did a card game in his first book called Hogswallow,
Yep.
which is like Goblin Poker, and people wanted that game. And I'm like, you can't have this game. It's imaginary. It's in the book. But I had to figure out how to make the game because so many people wanted it. And then I was asked to run a game at a convention as Gandersnitch. And I'm like, well, sure, I could run a game as Gandersnitch, but if I look at role-playing games from the eyes of a goblin who doesn't know what's going on, that's what I want to run. And that game became Argumental, which the premise of that game was all the dice. You use every single dice that you own because that's what Gandersnitch thought a role-playing game was you had all these crazy dice. So I have mostly retired from performing as Gandersnitch the Goblin. Gandersnitch is now a puppet, and he does some select shows and shows up at conventions where our gaming company is and selling. But I am done putting on the makeup and the costume. It was causing some health issues, and it was just... It was exhausting, and it was time for me to move on to other things. But I do love goblins, and evidently I have loved goblins for a very, very long time. I have so much goblin-y stuff. But the GURPS role-playing game books, only a couple game books that I have held onto for years and years and years. One of those being the West End original Star Wars D6 game, just because
I played that.
I love Star Wars, and even though that's probably not a collector's item, it feels like it to me. So it's
is.
a locked away in a safe place. But I actually sold all of my White Wolf books right out of college to buy my wife's engagement ring. Sold all of my gaming stuff, except for a couple of GURPS books, because. And I played GURPS, and the system was fine. It was clunky. It was math heavy, but the amount of research and detail that they went into in their source books is invaluable. And I think as a game designer and as an author, that instilled a habit in me of doing a crap ton of research.
Mm-hmm.
I just did freelance writing on a World War II game, World War I game. I didn't know anything about World War I. I knew about World War II. So before I wrote a single word, I spent several weeks doing everything I could about World War I, which was fascinating to me. And I chalked that up to GURPS. This is what I aspire to, right here.
Well, as John was saying, I think we all love the Star Wars books. I have handed my Star Wars rule book to people, going, even if you don't want to play a single game, read the book if you like Star Wars. Because there is so much research and the different things from different places brought together to be cohesive and
right.
More than world building, it's galaxy building.
And a lot of
the Firefly Serenity RPG book, which is super hard to find in print now.
Yeah.
I have like a digital copy of the book, but like once I heard that there was a Serenity RPG, like as much as I love Firefly, I was like, gimme all the source material.
Yep.
A couple
And a
comments.
lot of
I'm sorry, then I'll let you go on, Robert.
Yep.
Maddie says, played that one back in the day, referring to, not GURPS, the other thing you were talking about. And
White
Tony's,
Wolf?
there you go. Maddie says, I still buy White Wolf books when I come across them. And Tony says, I still own some. I'm guessing it's auto-correcting. Star Wars, thank you, Maddie. Auto-corrected to burp source books, too.
The burp source books.
Whatever you're into, Tony. We don't judge. I'm
How
lying.
to
We
burp
totally
is a
fucking
goblin.
judged.
How to burp is an elf.
Go on there, Robert.
I was just gonna say a lot of the Star Wars expanded universe, which is no longer canon, spun out of the role playing game.
Yeah.
Because when they were writing the role playing game, they had access to LucasArts and the archives, and they got to set up some stuff that was then carried on by other writers. I mean, it became canon, whatever they were putting in the game, so it
Or
all
at
had to
least
be approved.
Canon-ish. You know, it was close enough that... And I like the Star
Right.
Wars Legends concept, where they're like, they didn't throw it away. These are just stories that may have embellishment beyond what actually happened.
Right.
I'm okay with that. By the way, Maddie says, I'd
Yeah.
love to play a game called Burps.
Indeed.
It's... I trying to imagine what that would be like. I assume there'd be beer involved. Either with players or the game. I don't know. Okay, Robert, you were saying. Go on.
Well, I don't remember what I was saying. Although, just a couple of days ago, there was a survey put out on a Facebook group that's for independent role-playing game designers for us to chat and throw ideas at each other. And it asked for your top 5 most influential role-playing games. And almost everybody's listing Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of people are actually mentioning GURPS or Star Wars. But I answered mine with... because Dungeons & Dragons was not so much influential for me. It was a starter game, but I quickly moved on in middle school to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I played that.
And the Marvel. Yeah, it was a great game. The Palladium system is terrible, but it was a great game.
Yeah.
Because
Because you could play any animal. A humanoid animal.
Any animal. And then as they expanded that into like After the Bomb and stuff, the post-apocalyptic, it was a blast. And the Marvel superhero role-playing game was pretty
Which last
influential for
year
me.
I was running one of those games. John was in that game. It's I still like Marvel superheroes because of the simplicity. It's not a perfect system in the least, but it's still fun because 1 chart, 2 dice, go. Especially character creation is a broken thing.
I loved creating characters for that game. I brought it out last year and tried to play it with my kids, and it was too clunky and outdated for us.
Wynn is back, and she says Chaosium's original Call of Cthulhu is my favorite, which I did play that too. That was a blast. Which, by the way, for Maddie and Tony, Talking Toei is Wynn. She has also written some role-playing games. She's worked on Tunnels and Trolls, Grimtooth Traps. Wynn, I don't know any others. If there's others, feel free to let people know if you want the attention. If you don't, then just roll with this. It's
my favorite Call of Cthulhu moment was when one of our players came in and said, "Look at this cool guy that I've made with the shotgun, and he knows martial arts and stuff." And I said, "So you made a combat guy in a game that we're supposed to survive and run away from everything?" I said, "Welcome to being the first dead guy." Because that's what you're going to be.
Now, I do want to give John and Chris a few moments to talk about games they've played in the past. Now, John, as I said, runs a gaming store. John, how long have you run a gaming store for?
30 plus years.
So I'm guessing you've gone through quite a list of stuff. So let's start with Chris.
Yeah, my list is way shorter. Because I guess I started with 3.5 D&D, which would have
was
been that
great, and I
early
love those separate
mid-
handbooks until you added up how much everything costs sitting on your shelf.
Yeah. And then, like I said, I played the Serenity RPG for a little bit. We only got a couple of sessions in before people moved and life happened, which is always sad. Did a lot of Vampire Masquerade. That's a simple,
So
fairly simple
what's your
system.
favorite?
I think I gotta go with the D&D. I've always wanted to play in a Star Wars game. Haven't done any of that. I know someone who's got like all of the Star Wars books, and I would love to do something in there. But like it's always
Robert
hard
and
to
I
find
enjoy
people.
that. I was running, and again, I think I've said all this. You guys probably definitely know this, but last year in the fall, I was running 3 games a week on stream. One was a Marvel superheroes, one was Star Wars, the other one was the White Wolf system, but it was steampunk monster hunting. So if you took Sherlock Holmes
Yeah.
and blended it with Scooby Doo, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, John, what about you? What's your list and what's your top, however many you want to list?
Well, I can honestly say, obviously, from having a store, you're going to pretty much be involved with most everything.
Yeah, you're gonna forget more games than you remember.
Yeah.
I'm getting at that point in time. Well, and when you tell somebody that a dwarf and a elf were a class back in D&D when it first started up, they go, "No, it wasn't." And I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, yes, it was."
It was the original multi-class.
I love when you get a group together that's if they want to run something that's not party centric. White Wolf was great for that because you could kind of be your own person in it. You can form alliances if you wanted to, or you can go and burn the world down if you. It didn't tend to lend towards long campaigns, although we did play a White Wolf game that lasted for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And we ran it in the local area, so everybody kind of knew where everything was at. So I think that's a key thing.
When I would play White Wolf, do you guys remember before we had Google Maps and all this, you had these really wonderful fold-out laminated maps. So after paper maps, we had these laminated ones, and they'd be one city in particular, then it'd have like a zoom out of the region around the city. But you'd have a close-up block for block of the city. I love those for White Wolf games because I could go, we're going to play in LA or Chicago or Washington, D.C., and I always avoided New York because everything went on in New York. So, those.
I like Dresden. I like the Fate system a lot. Shadowrun tended to run more towards those episodal type games. You didn't really have any epic type games in it. We're D&D, like I said, we've got a campaign that's been rolling along for 25 plus years. So you can just kind of pick it up and do what you want with it. Any good honorable mentions? I love the dice system for Star Wars. A lot of people hate it, but I like how it gives the DM a lot of options to adjudicate what things are going on.
It makes
you
it
can
very
still fail and still get something done, or you can still get something done and still have something bad happen in the background.
It's very cinematic, and that's something with the group, with the players I chose for that game. After a couple game sessions where we got used to the rules, I then started encouraging them, when you roll these extra successes, even though you failed the advantages or the disadvantages, whichever it fell to, if you have an idea of what happened, don't leave it all to me. You're all creative people, and definitely throw in your 2 cents because that might be perfect for what happened.
Now, I tend to be an archiver of role-playing games, so I mean we have shelves of just older games that people haven't done, and some of them, to be quite honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the superhero White Wolf system.
Oh, I didn't even know they had one.
Aberrant and that type of thing. I mean, it's kind of fun if you have to kind of have everybody on the same page to play it, I guess.
I have some friends who want to play a Deadlands game.
So I was going to say Savage Worlds, we play a lot of that. So we played Deadlands, we played the Weird War. Actually, I had a lot of fun in the Weird War. World War II. I played an Indian Scout in it. I had a lot of fun with. And that's one of the advantages of Savage Worlds, I think, is because it tempo with the stuff. We played Fallout in it, so
Oh yeah.
it's easy to take a lot of the. So if you want to get newer players into something, find a video game that they like and run a role playing that's based off.
I remember the World of
You
Warcraft
can throw those together in a
role-playing
week.
game, and I was very excited about that. Never played it, but I downloaded a few of the base rule things, and I like the concept of if we like World of Warcraft and we all play it, why not do a tabletop role-playing game? That would be.
Yeah.
Matt Mercer and those guys over at Critical Role, they've done a whole bunch of. I think they've done 3 specific. They adapted things in WoW to 5e for Wizards when they were releasing. I don't remember.
Well, this is actually
One of it was a Hearthstone was coming out,
Yeah.
like Kobold's one. So the guys over at Critical Role, like they did a World of Warcraft version 5e
Nice.
little game that was
Now,
super fun.
Yeah, and the games I can probably tell you that I didn't care for were like Wheel of Time and things like that. I don't like the role-playing games where you can't really change anything.
I agree.
You're kind of a cog in the wheel, and it's like, no matter what you do, you're not changing anything over there, so it's like, you're just kind of going around, as you said before, and fighting things. It's like, yeah.
No, I agree with you on that.
I wanted me to be the story. I don't.
Right.
This is my problem with a lot of MMOs, because which originally were called MMORPGs. You're not central to the story. You're definitely a lackey. John, would you reset your camera one more time, please? It's now, Chris, you bringing up Critical Role. This is a perfect time. We got a half hour left. Let's start talking about the future of role-playing games, and I want to open this conversation up by Critical Role. If you don't know, if you're not that much into gaming, they recently did. Well, first of all, who they are. Chris, why don't I hand this to you? You're very excited and passionate about it. So tell them a little bit in 2 minutes or less about Critical Role, and then give us 2 minutes on the Kickstarter and why it happened, where it's going, and then we'll branch into opinions of where gaming is going.
Yeah. So back in 2014, 2015, I think it was, Will Wheaton and Felicia Day's company, Geek and Sundry, started a Twitch stream, and one of the things was they heard Matt Mercer, who's a voice actor, and a bunch of his friends who are all voice actors, who've done all kinds of crazy ass shit, whose accolades I only remember a few of off the top of my head, but all of them have voiced some amazing characters. They started running their, homebrewed D&D campaign set in the world of Taldore, which I just bought their campaign supplement guide and have been reading through all of the lore. But anyway, they've over the last 5 or so years blown up into, now they've been able to separate from Geek and Sundry and all of that and form their own company, making content and stuff, playing their D&D game. And last month they started a Kickstarter to create a 22-minute cartoon.
Now, why did they do that? What triggered that?
They had always wanted to, see themselves as a cartoon. And people for several years have been asking, like, hey, are you guys going to animate any of what you guys are doing on stream? And they thought, all right, sure, we'll make one single 22-minute episode of a story that
before
happens
that, they have their animated intro. They're like 2.5, 3-minute intro.
Well, yeah. So during one of their sponsors is D&D Beyond, and Sam Riegel created a little 80s D&D style intro for D&D Beyond, and they, the guys over at D&D Beyond took that song and then animated it, and they were using it, and then they decided to make an actual animated intro for Critical Role instead of they usually had a live action, them dressed up as their characters sort of intro. But moving on from that, they decided, yeah, let's do one single 22-minute episode. This will happen of a brand new story that was never seen before. It wasn't, part of their original campaign before they started streaming, and it happened just before they started streaming, where you pick up. And it was $750,000 was their goal, which they met in 40 minutes. In 24 hours, they had almost $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe on this past Thursday, it ended at $11.3 million. It's the 5th highest grossing Kickstarter campaign ever, and number 1 in the movies, TV category specifically, which recently, until they broke it, was held by the Mystery Science Theater 3000 guys.
Who Joel showed up for their celebration party.
Yeah.
And he's also a DM and plays D&D. Now, the way this ties into us is this has shown such a force of support for tabletop role-playing that has surprised everybody. Us as gamers that's gamed for a decade to 4 decades or more, we knew, we're out there and we're playing. But this is definitely a flag on a pole for everybody to see that this is out there. This shows the world, the movie making industry, etc., that there is an audience for this. And this might trigger not only their 5 or 6 episodes that they're going to do, but
they're now up to a 10-episode miniseries.
Okay.
So they're doing 2 episodes of the original story, and then the next 8 episodes was one of their campaign story arcs called the Briarwood arc.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, Cliff Notes version. One of the characters is from a big rich family who owned a castle, land, all of that, and his backstory was these people came from across the sea and essentially took over the castle. Turns out one of them's a vampire. Yada yada yada. They're following that arc and turning that arc into the cartoon.
See, and the
which
nice
I'm
thing
really
about
excited
this,
for.
it's adult content, which isn't to say it's a lot of nudity and sex. It's not going to be True Blood or whatever. Or even Game of Thrones, but they use adult language, they swear, they have adult topics, and this is nice for us. Because yes, the kids can join later, but we work for a living, and it's nice to get the entertainment we want in something we can relate to. So what do you guys think this is going to do for the gaming industry? And John, I'd like to put this to you first and Robert second.
We've already seen some crawl prior to this into, let's say, the comic book industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've got character sheets that are on, like, Rick and Morty books and stuff like that. So, I think this is going to
have a comic coming out that's D&D themed.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
But even Deadpool had one. You Are Dead, and it had a D&D cover type thing. So I think this is only going to help because it's going to garner a lot of people towards that.
Robert? Go ahead, John.
No, I mean, past that, TSR in the past has always kind of fallen down when I think they had the chance of doing things with things. So hopefully they'll get a little bit smarter now and can, push forward with it. So.
Robert, you have some thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, as a indie game designer publisher, this is great for us. Indie games in general. So maybe I wouldn't even go 10 years back, but around 10 years ago, if you wrote your own role-playing game and you weren't one of the big guys, maybe you put it on the internet for free. Maybe you printed it out like Gazine and distributed it at Comic Cons or your local gaming shop or whatever. And that was about as far as you could go. If you wanted a career in the gaming industry, you had to be a freelance writer. You had to write for one of the big guys. Now, with Kickstarter, with Drive-Thru RPG, anybody can have an idea, can follow through, make a role-playing game. A lot of them are absolute crap. But then you get ones that are gyms. And so having more people into Dungeons and Dragons, having the resurgence in the hobby, that is great for people like me. I can do an independent role playing game. My neighbors don't think I'm in here sacrificing goats and worshiping Satan, which is not to say that I'm not doing that, but my neighbors don't know about it.
Sacrifice them.
Right, but and I'm not actually doing that for anybody that's
No,
actually
who can
listening.
afford a goat nowadays? Come on, especially to sacrifice.
I know.
You make the cheese and move on.
No, it's great. People are into it, and strangely enough, willing to try other things. It's not just even just a couple years ago, I would be selling at the convention. Somebody's like, "Oh, it's not Dungeons and Dragons. I don't play it," or "It's not Savage Worlds," or "It's not Cthulhu. That's not my game." Now it's, "Oh, cool. This is another different role-playing game. I'll give it a go."
John?
Go ahead, John.
And a quick note too is board games are having a resurgence. So over the last 6-7 years, I mean, just more board games. I mean,
And Will Wheaton's Tabletop really helped with that too.
True.
I want him to do more, but he's not. It makes me sad.
Tabletop was huge for board games, and honestly, Kickstarter was huge for board games. There is a lot of concern in the smaller companies in the industry that rely on Kickstarter feel that we're at the end, seeing signs that it's popping, and I think there's going to be a shakedown, and some companies are going to ride the wave through it just fine, and some others are gonna vanish.
It'll be your middle companies that
I
have
think
issues.
the drawback to Kickstarter is the retailers or the box stores and stuff don't see the stuff quickly.
Right.
Take for example, like
Right.
Bones. I couldn't order Bones stuff because they did their Kickstarter, and it's like, well, do I have to buy it through there? Now the advantage of that is you get to advertise, like for comic books, like Billy Keith,
Right.
a comic book. Well, you might as well just sell it on Kickstarter, because that's what you're doing. You're selling it on Kickstarter
Right.
instead of through the normal channels. So that might be where the drawback is on some of the stuff, is that retailers per se, they don't have a normal channel other than, well, I got to go to Kickstarter. I got to buy this thing on Kickstarter. Then I got to wait
Right.
next year to get it, because I got to wait for them to finally produce it and ship it to me, and I don't
Right.
see it for a while. So
And that is, well, like with my games, I focus on getting them into distribution and into retail.
Right.
A lot of my peers don't. They
No.
go the drive-through RPG route, and they print on demand, and that's not my goal as a role-playing game designer. I want it in stores. I'm not making a game just because it's a cool game and I want 12 people to play it. I'm making a game because this is how I make my living, and I want hundreds of people to buy it.
and that's the thing. That's the traditional channels that all these games have been successful in the past, not through
Right.
this,
So
this other means.
How do we
and
fix
stuff.
it?
So Kickstarter is going to be what it is, and I mean, I think it's good for advertising in that type of avenue for it. Drive-through RPG is not on your normal. If people don't know what it is, they're not going there usually to get whatever
New game.
their books are and
Right.
stuff. They're unless they're redirected to that particular thing.
Yep.
And Kickstarter's doing that because a lot of guys, I mean, it goes back through drive-through RPG, but as a normal channel, I mean, most people don't just go to, well, some guys do obviously, but most people do not. They're going to go to their LGS or, look for a book.
So
They
if
want to
Robert,
actually open up the book and look at it.
if Robert walked
Right.
through your door with a box full of books, is that a viable way for him to sell to retailers?
I don't think it is,
No,
'cause I've
because they
done-
don't know if they're going to take a chance on it to start.
Right. So what's
Right.
he do?
So you have to get into distribution, which
Right.
is challenging, but it's not impossible. My books are in distribution. They're through Studio 2, which is technically a consolidator, an agent that turns around and sells multiple products to the big distributors, who turns around and sells those to gaming stores. I do not make a lot of money when John sells one of my books that
Right.
he's ordered through distribution, but I do make some money. If there's 20 stores like John in a month selling 2 of my books, that's a paycheck that comes in.
So look at it like, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Like the normal distribution for books. I mean, Amazon's out there doing things, but I've sold more of one of our author's books here in the store than he sold through his own publicist.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something wrong with the distribution chain and stuff with that. I like what you're doing with the videos, because if you get those in front of people, people get to see that they're what they're going to be buying.
Right.
And if that's sent to me as a store owner, then it's easier for me to sell something that I've seen and know kind of what it
action,
is. And then Diamond, who's the biggest comic book distributor, has a gaming section in it. You need to get those in front of those people too, new channels.
Yeah.
So,
How do you do that?
you just submit it. I mean, it's just as simple as that. They have a submission guide. Now, they take a pretty deep cut profit-wise, but it is another. I mean, our philosophy in the store was when we stopped doing sports cards, it was, do I want to make some money off of it, or do I want to make no money off of it?
Right.
And we decided, let's make some money. So,
As an indie game publisher, I always tell people when they're wanting to get into making role-playing games, because that's what I do, you have to, if you want to make money, want to go for distribution. And if you want to be in distribution, you have to have high production value, and you have to have a solid, polished product. You're
Indeed.
creating a product. If you're just putting it on Drive Through RPG, slap up whatever crap you want, and people will pay for it a couple of bucks. They might play it, and if it's no good, they're not out any money.
Hey, Robert,
You don't. Yeah.
humble bundle.
grab Starship in front of him and just flip to a couple pictures. Show us a couple pictures in this, talking about production value, because this is why a lot of players buy the book. The cover, of course, makes them pick it up, and
Right. And the fact that this is a hardback book. It's not a thick book. It's 120 something pages.
which actually
and,
that's a draw for me, because I don't necessarily want a 300-400 page book every time I buy a new game, because
Yeah.
it's imposing, it's intimidating to have to read
Yeah.
that much stuff
And
just to play.
And I do caution the new people that want to get into developing games and stuff like that is, don't try to be different for different's sake. I mean, it just
Right.
never works.
So honestly, the people that are making the most money, the companies that are making the most money in independent role-playing games, they're making supplements for Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
They're making stuff that uses the D&D rules. I personally don't want to do that.
Right.
I want to make my own stuff. But right, like that. Yeah.
No, this is great. Like, full color map of the world in the front of the book, and then what's even great, the back has a fold out version, which I'm super excited about.
See, and these are all great examples of you make a decent product first and foremost.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, all those books are quality. The bindings don't fall apart. I mean,
And they don't, because they're not print on demand. I actually go through a traditional printer. I have to print 1,100 copies to get a decent price on it, which means I have to do a Kickstarter at this point in my company's life.
But on the
I
other
don't
hand,
have-
your Kickstarter is to print it because you've already paid out of your own pocket for all the art, all the writing, all the formatting, everything. You've created
some
a
of the
product.
some of the Kickstarter goes towards. So I will, for my next project, for instance, I have bought about 10 pieces of art already. I use that to show off where we're going. $2,000, $2,500 of the Kickstarter budget for the next game, Scouts of the Weirdwood Forest, is art. Because I do hire artists, I hire professional artists, and I pay them a professional rate. I don't go to clip art on the internet. I don't. I want to say I don't hire friends and family, but my brother-in-law did the logo design for us. I paid him for it.
But you
I have family that's artists.
But you
so.
treat them like a business, and if they don't come through in the amount of time listed in the contract, you're like,
I do. I treat them like a business.
Right.
I treat them like a business, but I try to be a good client,
Right.
boss. Like one of my, he's now a friend. One of my artists in Star, his mom, hospital, he was not doing okay. And I could tell in his art that he was turning in that he wasn't, something else was bugging him. So I called him on it. I'm not going to call his name out on air,
Right.
but I was like, look, what's going on? What's going on? And he's like, I'm just really stressed. I'm trying to get these deadlines done. I'm like, dude, I build in extra time in case there's an emergency. This is an emergency. Go deal with your family. Deal with that. Come back to the table refreshed and ready to do art. And he was able to do that. And so I do treat it like a business, but I don't treat it as like a faceless corporation business. It's a family business.
Which, by the way, unrelated, I wore my Miskatonic University shirt today. So
yeah.
It's we've got about 10 minutes left here. So I want to go into, anybody have any closing thoughts about any of the stuff we discussed or anything we missed?
Yeah, I want to bring up one thing.
Go ahead.
Even if you never play a role-playing game, like you buy a book just because it looks cool, that's a perfectly acceptable thing to do. I have plenty of games on my shelf that I will never play. The fact that as a kid I could get into them and they got me into reading and learning big words and complicated concepts and math, I think it is awesome to buy your kids role-playing games, let them read the dang book, whether or not they ever play it or not.
You know, in that, and that's a great thing to point out, because I knew how to do algebra before, because back in my day, you didn't get algebra at Pugmire. There's a great game.
I probably will never play Pugmire because no one ever wants to run it. But, like, when I heard about this on Kickstarter, because this is the Kickstarter book, and now I've missed both Monarchies of Mal books, which make me sad. But, like, yeah, I love reading through this, like the lore and the history of things.
Maddie says, I know quite a few people who collect RPG books but have never played.
Right.
But I want to point this out for parents, handing your kids. I was in John's store, and a young lady came in. She was 16 or 17, high school, and she brought her father in who had no idea what any of this crap was. And basically she's like, I've never played. I want to play. And John helped him out and pointed out, you know, this is what you would need. And it was about $100 for everything she would need, all said and told. And the father's like, and that's what you really want. And she was like, yeah, absolutely. That's what I want for my birthday. There is a value in handing these things to kids. It teaches them social skills on top of the math and the literature, how to speak properly, how to read, how to be creative. And maybe they go into art. Maybe they go into theater. Maybe they go into any other creative area, but this is all a launching pad, a stepping stone into so much more.
And I think that might be the future of RPGs and stuff, is that, so you have MMOs, but eventually I think you're going to have it to where you can get a pickup game online.
Right.
And play in it. What I like is I joined a brainstorming group, and you can actually sit down and talk about how you design your own game. What would be cool for us to play? You know, and I like that.
That's
kind of
something else
homebrewing.
I wanted to point out is if you're in an area like I forget if it was Tony or Maddie that said they have nobody. I think it was Tony said nobody in their area to play with. We play with people across the world, and this isn't our whole gaming group. You can get all kinds of diversity in there, as it was mentioned with the Spanish-speaking girl who didn't speak very good English. But you can do this all online. We're doing this on Discord, or you could do it on Skype or Google Hangouts. You don't have to be in the same area. Maddie says, I absolutely love how role-playing games have gone from being bad to being much more accepted as art and learning. Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely. It's well, guys, I appreciate you coming on at last moment notice, because that's what this was. The regular Talk of the Tavern crew all had life happen tonight. And I tagged my D&D group, who we stream Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. Stealing for Survival, post-apocalyptic, medieval fantasy. A lot of fun stuff in there, a lot of silliness.
Indeed.
But and each game gets a little bit better as we're gelling and learning each other. And as Robert, I think, said earlier, we go off topic, but we do it in character, and I think that adds a lot to the game. And you get just experiences that you can't get anywhere else in life. This is not like a video game. This is not like... There we go. Scouts.wicked-clever.com. And if you just go to wicked-clever.com, I'm sure there's a link to it there.
You'll find it.
As well as Robert's other games. So yeah, make sure you join us those other times. We got 5 minutes left. We're going to sit back, talk about anything, and I'll interrupt when we time for the closing music.
So I posted the third podcast just a little while ago, or a couple hours ago.
You got a link?
On scouts.wicked-clever.com.
Okay. Very good.
It'll be the first thing on there. Yeah, we're doing a podcast with some other game designers and performers and whatnot. We were going to do Twitch, but with all the technical difficulties, it's too much. Too much for me. I'm like, I understand radio. We can do podcasts.
I'll tell you, Robert,
playtesting.
If I can help you with the Twitch thing, let me know. It is not any different from doing internet radio. It's just you have a camera on. So.
Yeah, I have to get the right group of people.
Yes,
and
you do.
I have to have a time where I'm not in the middle of their project to launch it.
Yep.
It's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
So the podcast works for me right now because the people I'm doing it with know how podcasting works.
Well, I'll also tell you this, with Twitch or YouTube. Now, YouTube you can stream live, but with both of them, you can put a pre-recorded thing up. So if you want to do once a month on Twitch, a pre-recorded thing that you upload, that is still something you can do.
Oh, I'm going to look into that then.
Yeah, and like I said, if I can be of any assistance, let me know. As you know from the past, I'm more than happy to help others succeed in their endeavors.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, Robert, do you ever take player input for like future things in your game, for maybe expansions and stuff?
I do, actually.
Like, hey, I made this cool badge, and then they get credit,
Totally. Totally. I hesitate to do things that go into print for credit. I want to pay people anything that ends up in print. For two reasons. One, I think that if you're doing work, even if it's fan work, if it's worthy of being printed and published, it's worthy of being paid for, because it's work. Two, I want to make sure that I own it so that there are no issues down the line of somebody saying, you can't use this anymore. Oh, too bad. We had a contract. I paid for it, and I own it now. But yes, I always take feedback. That's part of the reason we're doing a playtest podcast, is so that we can get people's input. And actually, that preview that I sent you and sent out to reviewers, we're going to make that live for everybody next Monday. We're going to post it up on Drive-Thru RPG, the preview PDF, send people to download it so they can see the game 2 weeks before we launch on Kickstarter.
Very good. Very good. It's also, keep in mind, John has I guess, kind of an artist collective. The cutout behind you, John, that's from one of your artists, correct?
Yep, that's Pulse. That's one of our superheroes.
So, yeah, a lot of the stuff you see on Conquest Publishing's Facebook page, etc., that's all his group that's working on his comics. So you may have another artist.
And we're fortunate that we've got, professionals that have been in the industry. They just want to get back into it. Billy Tucci, who does the She comic, he's doing our variant cover for our first book. So. And I think a lot of people know who Mercedes Lack.
Cool.
We get to do some of her work too, so always fun.
Okay, let's do a closing
toast. And I love how
toast.
creative people are. So.
Here's to the creativity of creating worlds together.
Here.
Tony, Maddie,
comment
thanks.
about making role-playing games. Wow, that'd be.
What's that?
So we should make a comic about making role playing.
You could. Immersing in the
Oh,
world.
so there is a web comic, and I cannot think of the title now. Where the web comic is introducing people to different role playing games. Great Savage World spread, and basically teaching people the game through this web comic. I'm gonna have to look it up, and you can post it for your audience or something.
Yeah.
There you go. Maddie, Tony, Wynn, thanks for joining us. Gary, you too. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Make sure you join us every Monday at 8 p.m., as well as Sundays for the game, though next week is kind of up in the air because of, well, life. Okay, here's the outro music, guys. We will catch you again sometime next week.
Thanks for joining us for the discussion shenanigans tonight. You are the one thing that makes the show what it is. Don't forget to join us at the Tavern next week. Until then, have fun, keep learning, and be good to one another.
Up
Now,
to
raise your
4
glass of
players.
good cheer. Enjoy the small moments every day and steamy dreams every night.